For
the
a
morning
long
after his
moment,
visit,
I
woke
just stood
earlier
there,
than usual,
staring at the door
sunlight
as
spilled
though it
through
had
the curtains,
grown a heartbeat of its
casting
own.
golden patterns
His
across
shadows
the
stretched
floor,
across my
but
porch.
it wasn't the light
His
that
hand
roused
still
me.
lifted from
It
the
was the
knock.
hum in my chest.
I could have pretended
the
not to be
lingering
home.
warmth of the night
I
before.
could have stayed frozen.
I lay there for
let
a
him
while,
walk away,
listening to
and
the
kept
stillness
my
of the
memories
house,
sealed just
but it
as they
no
had been for
longer
decades.
felt like a weight
But
pressing down.
my hand moved
Instead,
before my
it
doubts
felt like a
could stop
pause.
it.
When
A
I
breath
opened the
held
door,
before the next note
time
of a song.
collapsed into itself.
I thought of him.
He stood there,
of the way
older,
his eyes had
yes,
softened
his
when
hair
he
more
spoke of his
silver than
past,
dark,
of
his
the
shoulders
gentle way
not
he
quite
asked
as straight.
if he could
but it was
see
him.
me again.
Those
My
eyes
heart
held the
fluttered at
same
the memory,
spark I remembered,
and I smiled
that
despite
same mixture
myself.
of mischief
Imagine
and
that.
gentleness.
At
For
68,
a heartbeat, I
lying
forgot
in bed
the years
with butterflies
between
in
us.
my stomach.
I was the girl
Who would
again.
have thought?
Standing
days
in the
that
summer
followed
sun
were
with him
different.
by my side.
I moved through
Margaret,
them with a
he said,
lightness
his
I
voice
hadn't
low
felt
but
in
steady,
years.
as
The
if
garden
testing the
seemed
sound of my
greener,
name
the
after
air
so
fresher.
long.
The
Hearing
small
it from his
routines of
lips
my life
nearly
less
undid
heavy.
me.
It
I
wasn't
gripped
that he
the door
erased
frame
the
to steady
loneliness
myself,
I'd carried,
swallowing
but
past
his
the
presence,
lump in
his
my
return,
throat.
it
reminded
really
me that
you.
my story
I
wasn't
whispered.
finished yet.
He gave a
that
small,
there was still room for
almost
surprise,
nervous smile.
for joy.
I wasn't
for the
sure if
kind
he'd
of
recognize
connection
me.
I
let out a
thought I'd
shaky
outlived.
laugh.
When
How
we
could
met
I
again,
not?
it was at the
For
park
a
near my
moment,
house. Neither of
he
us
arrived
moved.
with a bouquet
The
of
years
daisies,
stretched between us
simple
like a
and
rope
cheerful,
pulled tight,
just as he had
threatening
once
to
given me
snap.
when we were young.
Then I stepped aside,
I laughed as he handed
opening
them
the
to
door
me,
wider,
touched
Come
by
in.
the thought.
He
We
nodded
walked
and
slowly
entered,
together,
his
talking
eyes
about
sweeping
everything
the familiar,
and nothing,
unfamiliar space
as though
of
we
my
were
home.
rediscovering
He
the
paused
rhythm
to
of
look at the
us.
photographs on
He
the
told
wall.
me stories of
my
places
children's
he'd
weddings,
been,
my
markets in
grandchildren's
Morocco,
gap-toothed
sunsets
smiles,
in Greece,
a picture of my
winters
late
so
husband
cold
holding
in
Canada
Canada
that his
that
eyelashes
years
froze.
ago.
I
He didn't
listened with
comment,
wide eyes,
but I saw
not
the way
because
his
the
expressions
tales themselves were extraordinary,
respectful,
but
and
because
thoughtful.
they came from him.
I led him
Because
to the
after
living
all
room,
these years,
where the
I was
scent
hearing
of
the
life
lavender
he had
lingered from the
lived.
candle,
And when I
had
spoke
lit
of my own
earlier,
journey,
I gestured
of
for him
raising
to sit,
children, but
of
he
teaching,
hesitated,
of the love
as
I
if
shared with
afraid of
my late
intruding.
husband.
Only when
He
I lowered
listened with
myself
the
into my
same rapt
armchair
attention,
did he take the
honoring
couch opposite
every
me.
word. For a few
There were
moments,
moments of silence too,
filled the room
but
again.
they were no longer
though
heavy.
not the heavy
They were
silence of
comfortable,
loneliness,
filled with the
this
quiet
was thick
knowledge
with
that we didn't need
unspoken
to
words,
rush,
with
didn't need to
questions
prove
neither of us
anything.
knew how to
We had
ask.
already lived
Finally,
lifetimes
I said,
apart.
Why
Now,
now?
simply being
After
side by
all these
side
years,
was enough.
He
Still,
rubbed his
late at
hands
night,
together,
doubts
staring
crept in.
down at them.
Was
as
it
though
foolish
searching
to
for the
open my
right
heart
words.
again at this age?
I've thought about this
Was I
moment more
dishonoring the
times
memory
than I
of
can
my
count.
husband by
I wasn't
allowing
sure if
myself
I
to
had the
feel
right
this
if it
way
would
about
even
another
matter to you
man?
anymore.
The questions
But
weighed on
recently,
me.
he
But when I
paused,
looked at
his
his
voice
face,
tightening.
lined with years,
Recently, I
softened
lost
by
my
loss,
wife, yet
a
still
long
carrying
illness,
that spark.
and when she was
I
gone,
realized love
I
was
found
not a
myself
betrayal.
thinking about all
Love
the people I'd
in
loved
any
in my
form
life.
was a
You came
continuation
to
of
mind,
life.
Margaret.
My
You
husband
always
had been
did,
my
if I'm
partner,
being honest.
my anchor,
So
my
I-
joy.
I had to
and
see
now,
you. One
this
last
man's
time, if
presence,
nothing else,
was something different.
His words
a
hit me like a
rekindled
wave.
flame,
Grief,
a reminder that
confession,
my heart
and
was
longing
still
all
capable
at
of
once.
glowing.
My
One
heart
evening,
ached for his loss.
as we sat on my
Even
porch
as it
watching the
fluttered
sky
with the
turn
shocking
shades of
knowledge that I
pink
had
and
never
orange,
truly
he
left
reached
his
for my
memory.
hand.
I'm
His
sorry.
touch was tentative,
I said
almost
softly,
shy,
my eyes misting,
as though asking
I
permission.
didn't know about your wife.
I let my fingers
She was a good
intertwine
woman.
with his.
He
and in
replied
that
with
simple
quiet
gesture,
respect.
I
was
felt
lucky to have
decades
her.
meld away.
But even in those
You know,
years, there was
he
always
said
a corner
quietly,
of my heart
I never
that
thought we'd
wondered
have
about
another
you,
chance.
about us.
Life has a way
I
of
leaned
taking
back,
us where we
pressing a
least
hand to my
expect.
chest. But being
The
here with
years
you now,
my
it
husband
feels like a
flashed
gift.
in my mind.
I squeezed his
Our
hand.
children,
My
our
eyes
laughter,
misting.
our struggles.
It is a gift.
His
I
illness
agreed.
in the end.
One I never
I had
imagined
loved
receiving.
him fully.
With
And
every
in that
part
moment,
of me.
I realized
and yet,
something
hearing
profound.
this man across from me
At
admit
68,
that he had
I
carried
had
me
thought
in
my
his
life
heart all
was
this
winding
time
down
stirred
to
something
quiet
long
days of
dormant
repetition,
inside me.
of memories
I
and
thought
waiting.
I'd never see
But
you
here
again.
was proof that life
I
could
admit it,
surprise me
my voice
still.
trembling.
That joy
There were
was not
times I
confined
wanted to
youth.
look you up,
That connection
to
was
find
not
out where
limited
life
to those
had taken
early
you.
chapters.
But I was
there was
afraid
beauty in
I
this stage
suppose.
too,
Afraid
in
of what I
rediscovery
might
and
find.
second chances,
Afraid
in
of
learning that
reopening
the heart does
something
not
that had been
tire
closed.
simply because the body
He
grows
nodded
older.
slowly.
Our
His
meetings
gaze
steady
became
on
more
mine.
frequent.
I was afraid
Sometimes
too,
we cooked together,
but I
he had a
think
way
I'd
with
regret it
spices
forever
that made
if
my
I
kitchen
hadn't
come
come.
alive.
The kettle on the
Sometimes
stove
we walked
whistled
by the
suddenly,
lake,
startling
watching the
us
ducks
both.
glide across
I let
the
out a
water.
small laugh.
Sometimes
Wiping
we
at my
simply
eyes
sat in silence
and rose to my
The
feet.
comfort of
Tea,
presence enough
I
to
said
fill the
simply,
evening.
grateful for
My
the
children
distraction.
noticed the change
In the
me.
kitchen, my
As
daughter
I poured
teased me
hot
on the
water
phone,
into cups
saying
and
I
dropped in the
sounded
tea
lighter,
bags.
happier.
My hands shook.
My son,
I had
ever
thought
the
my heart
practical
was too
one,
old for this
asked
kind of
questions
flurry.
about who this
Too
man
settled
was,
for this
his
kind of
background,
storm, his
and
intentions.
yet here I was.
I understood their
68
concern,
years old,
but I also
blushing
knew that
and
they
trembling
would see
like a girl preparing
in time
tea for her
what
first
I already
love.
felt.
When I returned,
That this was not
he was
reckless,
studying the bookshelf,
nor was it fleeting.
his fingers
It was
brushing
real,
the spines of novels.
and it was good.
He looked
One
up when I
afternoon,
entered,
as I
and
sat
the
in the
smile
garden
he
with
gave
him,
me was so
I thought about the
familiar that my
roses that
chest
still
ached.
bloomed
I
year
set the
after
cups
year.
down and sat
They
again,
were no longer
wrapping my
perfectly
hands
trimmed,
around the warmth.
no longer
We
carefully
talked,
tended,
at
but
first,
they bloomed
cautiously,
nonetheless,
about where
wild
life had
and
taken
beautiful
us,
in
about
their
our children,
resilience, about
that
the
was
winding
me. I
paths
realized
that had brought us to
that
this
was
moment.
us.
He
Two
told me
lives
about his
weathered
years
by
working
time,
abroad,
the
by
places he
joy
had
and
seen,
sorrow,
the family
still
he had
capable
raised.
of blossoming
I
when the
shared
season
stories
was
of
right.
my teaching,
And so,
of my
when
grandchildren's
I look back at that
antics,
evening
of
when
the
he first
quiet
appeared
rhythms
at
of
my
my
door,
days.
I
But
marvel
slowly,
at the way life
the conversation
works.
turned
I
softer,
didn't expect him to
more
show
intimate.
up.
I had
We
made
spoke
peace,
of memories,
or so
shared
I thought,
glances from our
with
youth,
the idea that our
stolen
story was
laughter
finished
under
before
summer
it truly
skies,
began.
dreams we
But
once
fate,
whispered to each
or
other,
chance,
when the
or
world
something
felt
greater,
wide open,
placed him back in
with
my
each
life,
memory,
not to
the
erase
years
the
seemed
past,
to peel away,
but to enrich
and
the
for fleeting
present.
moments,
Now,
it felt
each
as though
day
no
feels like a
time
gift,
had passed at all.
each shared laugh,
And yet,
each
the
gentle
lines
touch,
on his face reminded
each
me,
quiet moment
the
of
ache in my
simply being
knees when I
together
shifted reminded
me
me,
life, we were
at
not
any
those
age,
young dreamers
is
anymore.
full of possibility.
We were two people
I am not the
standing
young
at the
girl
far
who
shore
once
of
dreamed
life,
of forever,
reunited
nor the
by
middle-aged
chance
woman carrying
or
the weight
fate,
of responsibility.
when neither of us had
I
expected it.
am a
At
68-year-old
one
woman
point,
who has lived,
he grew
who has
quiet,
lost,
his
who has
eyes
loved
lingering on
deeply,
me.
and
You haven't
who,
changed, he
against
said
all
softly.
odds, I
has been given the
laughed,
joy
shaking
of
my head.
rediscovering love
Oh,
again.
I've
And
changed
for that,
plenty.
I
Not
am
in the ways that
endlessly,
matter, he
humbly
replied,
glad.
and the sincerity in his voice silenced me. The night stretched on, the hours slipping by unnoticed. When I finally glanced at the clock, it was nearly midnight. I hadn't stayed up so late in years, and yet I felt more awake than I had in a long, long time. As he stood to leave, a pang of fear shot through me. Fear that this was all I would have, just one unexpected evening with him before he vanished again. But at the door, he turned to me, his hand hovering over mine. "May I see you again?" he asked gently. My breath caught, my heart pounding as if it hadn't aged a day. I could have said no, told myself it was too late, too complicated. But instead, I smiled, tears shining in my eyes. "Yes," I whispered. "I'd like that." And as he stepped out into the cool night air, I stood in the doorway, watching him go, my soul alight with a hope I hadn't felt in years. For a long moment, I just stood there, staring at the door as though it had grown a heartbeat of its own. His shadows stretched across my porch, his hand still lifted from the knock. I could have pretended not to be home. I could have stayed frozen, let him walk away, and kept my memories sealed just as they had been for decades. But my hand moved before my doubts could stop it. When I opened the door, time collapsed into itself. He stood there, older, yes, his hair more silver than dark, his shoulders not quite as straight, but it was him. Those eyes held the same spark I remembered, that same mixture of mischief and gentleness. For a heartbeat, I forgot the years between us. I was the girl again, standing in the summer sun with him by my side. "Margaret," he said, his voice low but steady, as if testing the sound of my name after so long. Hearing it from his lips nearly undid me. I gripped the doorframe to steady myself, swallowing past the lump in my throat. It's really you," I whispered. He gave a small, almost nervous smile. I wasn't sure if he'd recognize me. I let out a shaky laugh. How could I not? For a moment, neither of us moved. The years stretched between us like a rope pulled tight, threatening to snap. Then I stepped aside, opening the door wider. "Come in." He nodded and entered, his eyes sweeping the familiar-unfamiliar space of my home. He paused to look at the photographs on the wall, my children's weddings, my grandchildren's gap-toothed smiles, a picture of my late husband holding my hand at a picnic years ago. He didn't comment, but I saw the way his expression softened, respectful and thoughtful. I led him to the living room, where the scent of lavender lingered from the candle I had lit earlier. I gestured for him to sit, but he hesitated, as if afraid of intruding. Only when I lowered myself into my armchair did he take the couch opposite me. For a few moments, silence filled the room again, though not the heavy silence of loneliness. This was thick with unspoken words, with questions neither of us knew how to ask. Finally, I said, "Why now? After all these years?" He rubbed his hands together, staring down at them as though searching for the right words. "I've thought about this moment more times than I can count. I wasn't sure if I had the right, if it would even matter to you anymore. But recently, he paused, his voice tightening. Recently, I lost my wife. A long illness. And when she was gone, I found myself thinking about all the people I'd loved in my life. You came to mind, Margaret. You always did, if I'm being honest.
So
I had to see you. One last time, if nothing else. His words hit me like a wave, grief, confession, and longing all at once. My heart ached for his loss, even as it fluttered with the shocking knowledge that I had never truly left his memory. I'm sorry, I said softly, my eyes misting. I didn't know about your wife. She was a good woman, he replied with quiet respect. I was lucky to have her. But even in those years, there was always a corner of my heart that wondered about you, about us. I leaned back, pressing a hand to my chest. The years with my husband flashed in my mind. Our children, our laughter, our struggles, his illness in the end. I had loved him fully, with every part of me. And yet, hearing this man across from me admit that he had carried me in his heart all this time stirred something long dormant inside me. I thought I'd never see you again, I admitted, my voice trembling. There were times I wanted to look you up, to find out where life had taken you. But I was afraid, I suppose. Afraid of what I might find. Afraid of reopening something that had been closed. He nodded slowly, his gaze steady on mine. I was afraid too. But I think I'd regret it forever if I hadn't come. The kettle on the stove whistled suddenly, startling us both. I let out a small laugh, wiping at my eyes, and rose to my feet. Tea, I said simply, grateful for the distraction. In the kitchen, as I poured hot water into cups and dropped in the tea bags, my hands shook. I had thought my heart was too old for this kind of flurry, too settled for this kind of storm. And yet here I was, 68 years old, blushing and trembling like a girl preparing tea for her first love. When I returned, he was studying the bookshelf, his fingers brushing the spines of novels. He looked up when I entered, and the smile he gave me was so familiar that my chest ached. I set the cups down and sat again, wrapping my hands around the warmth. We talked. At first, cautiously, about where life had taken us, about our children, about the winding paths that had brought us to this moment. He told me about his years working abroad, the places he had seen, the family he had raised. I shared stories of my teaching, of my grandchildren's antics, of the quiet rhythms of my days. But slowly, the conversation turned softer, more intimate. We spoke of memories, shared glances from our youth, stolen laughter under summer skies, dreams we once whispered to each other when the world felt wide open. With each memory, the years seemed to peel away, and for fleeting moments, it felt as though no time had passed at all. And yet, the lines on his face reminded me, the ache in my knees when I shifted reminded me, we were not those young dreamers anymore. We were two people standing at the far shore of life, reunited by chance, or fate, when neither of us had expected it. At one point, he grew quiet, his eyes lingering on me. You haven't changed, he said softly. I laughed, shaking my head. Oh, I've changed plenty. Not in the ways that matter, he replied. And the sincerity in his voice silenced me. The night stretched on, the hours slipping by unnoticed. When I finally glanced at the clock, it was nearly midnight. I hadn't stayed up so late in years, and yet I felt more awake than I had in a long, long time. As he stood to leave, a pang of fear shot through me. Fear that this was all I would have, just one unexpected evening with him before he vanished again. But at the door, he turned to me, his hand hovering over mine. May I see you again? He asked gently. My breath caught, my heart pounding as if it hadn't aged a day. I could have said no, told myself it was too late, too complicated. But instead, I smiled, tears shining in my eyes. Yes, I whispered. I'd like that. And as he stepped out into the cool night air, I stood in the doorway, watching him go, my soul alight with a hope I hadn't felt in years. At 68, I had grown used to the quiet. My house wasn't always like this. Once it was filled with children's laughter, my husband's footsteps, and the clatter of life in motion. Now, the walls mostly heard the low hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock in the hallway, and the shuffle of my slippers across the wooden floor. Some people find peace in that kind of silence. For me, it sometimes felt like a weight pressing down, a reminder of how much had changed. Mornings had their rhythm. I would wake up, make myself a cup of tea, and sit by the window that overlooked the garden. The roses I planted 20 years ago were still there, stubbornly blooming year after year, though a little wilder now without my husband's steady hands to prune them. I'd sip my tea slowly, letting the steam fog my glasses, and think about the people who used to sit around my kitchen table. It's a strange thing growing older. You spend decades giving yourself to others, raising children, working, caring, putting everyone else first. And then one day the house feels too big and your days too long. My son lived states away with his own family, busy with his career. My daughter had built her life in another city too. They called, of course, and sometimes visited, but most days it was just me. I tried not to resent that. After all, hadn't I once left my own mother behind to chase a future with the man I loved? Life comes full circle in ways that sting. I filled my time the best I could. I volunteered at the library once a week, where children still brought sticky fingers to the picture books. I baked bread on Sundays, more out of habit than necessity. I read novels late into the night, escaping into other people's stories when my own felt too still. Yet, despite these small comforts, I sometimes felt invisible, as though the world had quietly moved on without me. It was during one of those ordinary afternoons that the thought of him drifted back into my mind. Him. Even now, at this age, the word carried weight. He was someone from another chapter of my life, a chapter one thought had been sealed long ago. We had not spoken in decades. He wasn't my husband, though I had loved my husband dearly until his last breath. No, this was someone else. Someone from before. I had met him when I was just a girl, full of dreams and a little too much stubbornness. He was the kind of man who carried sunshine in his smile, who could make the dullest day feel alive. We had been close once, closer than I dared to admit even now, but life had pulled us apart. Choices had been made, paths taken, and soon we were on opposite sides of the world. Letters stopped coming. The last time I saw him, I was still young enough to believe that goodbyes weren't always permanent. Over the years, he became more memory than man. Sometimes, late at night, when the house was quiet and I couldn't sleep, I would find myself wondering what had become of him. Did he marry? Did he build a family? Was he happy? I never dared to look him up, never searched the endless internet that my grandchildren used with such ease. Part of me was afraid of what I might find. Part of me preferred to keep him as he was in my memory, forever young, forever smiling. That afternoon, though, as I folded laundry in my living room, I thought of him with unusual clarity. Maybe it was the stillness of the house, or the way the sunlight poured across the carpet, but the memory came rushing back with such force that I had to sit down. I shook my head at myself. At 68, what business did I have reminiscing about a man from my youth? I carried on with my chores, pushing the thought aside. My days, after all, were built on routine. I watered the plants, I made myself a light supper, I settled into my chair to read. Evening fell, the kind of soft twilight that makes the world seem half-dream. I was just about to close the curtains when I noticed movement at the end of my driveway. At first, I assumed it was the neighbor's son, cutting across the street like he sometimes did. But as the figure drew closer, my breath caught in my throat. The walk, the shoulders, even from a distance, something about him was achingly familiar. My hands trembled against the curtain. It couldn't be. It simply couldn't. I stood frozen as he came closer, his step sure, his eyes scanning the house as though it were both strange and familiar. And then, as if time itself folded in on me, I recognized him. It was him, the man I had not seen in decades. The man I had tucked away in memory, believing I would never, ever cross paths with again. My heart pounded in my chest, wild and unsteady, like a young girl's again. I gripped the curtain tighter, whispering to myself, "No, it can't be." But there he was, walking up my path, his hair streaked with gray, his face lined by years. But those eyes were the same. I didn't expect him to show up. After all these years, after all the distance and silence, I thought that part of my life had long been buried. And yet, as he raised his hand to knock on my door, a strange warmth spread through me. Fear, yes. Shock, absolutely. But beneath it all, something else too. I was glad. Glad he had come. Glad I would finally see the face I thought I had lost forever.